I'm Eric Bader. I'm a director of photography. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I shoot all kinds of things, but I always gravitate towards music videos. It's kind of like my first love and has remained a #1 in my career. So the project is for the video Hold Me Like a Grudge for Fall Out Boy. There were like a few ideas that were being bandied around for a couple months, and then ultimately they settled on they wanted to finish a trilogy that they had started 10 years or so prior with the Dance Dance video and This Ain't a Scene video as well. At the end of the arms race video, Pete jumps off of his amp in this like big epic moment. And then so our video takes up where that left off. No one catches him in the crowd and he breaks his leg and then he gets superpowers, and that kind of leads to the dissolution of Fall Out Boy. And then it's about Pete having to get Fall Out Boy back together after he kind of left them to become a disgraced superhero. The idea was already like pretty developed when Brendan Walter kind of pitched it to me. He's the director. Since I'm on the East Coast and he's on the West Coast, we did a lot of Zoom meetings and we kind of tossed some more ideas back and forth. The guys in the band had like a ton of input of like different like jokes and gags and stuff they wanted to put in. There's tons of little Easter eggs for anyone who's watched a lot of their videos. We tried to pull as much as we could from different videos here and there, not just from that trilogy. So there's lots of little references throughout. And the guys in general just kind of like having fun with their own personas and with like the band itself. There's always a big difference when you work with a band that like honestly like loves being together and loves doing it and like is like just having a lot of fun on set. We scouted and kind of pivoted some things based on the locations we had and what we could do and what made sense at the time that we had. And then we also kind of ironed out overall to try to find like a real logic to the story, which Joe Troman helped a lot with. That he kind of like had a little like meeting with us where we just were pitching a bunch of ideas, and that's kind of when we ended up settling on the Terminator Pete in the future, that he's like revisiting all these timelines. So he's in the Dance Dance video and that's like burning down, and so that's like the far future version of Pete. I wouldn't say it grounded the video in a real like strict narrative, but I think it does when you break down the overall reality of it and the overall narrative, that it does make sense, which I appreciate because it doesn't have to. It's a music video, but it does. I mean, really, we wanted it to kind of have this epic scale to it, that we wanted it to, you know, play on the idea of like multiverse movies. We wanted to have this epic idea behind it, which like is certainly what pushed us immediately into the direction of anamorphic lenses and then the color palettes. But we also wanted it to feel like our own thing too. So a lot of it was putting that spin and taking all of those kind of disparate elements in different kinds of different locations and tying them all together. That kind of dictated the overall look. Was like how can we make this thing feel like the epic journey of Fall Out Boy, given, you know, the normal constraints you have in music video and the time constraints we had of just wanting to get this video out in the world. We shot on the Alexa 35. I'm a big fan of just Super 35 as a format. There's just, you know, way more lens choices out there, the history of it. But in general, I mean, the Alexa 35, I think, is the greatest digital cinema camera ever made. The latitude's incredible, the flexibility is incredible, the extended like sensitivity for low light. Like it saves you like not only from like having to like light from scratch, but also being able to shoot at a respectable stop in those kind of low light scenarios, which is nice. Anamorphic was pretty much a no-brainer from the second we started talking about this. There's so many movie references to like not just making it like a superhero story because of like the Pete angle and the fact we wanted it to feel kind of Marvel-y overall. But I mean, there's obviously like Terminator 2, there's Back to the Future. We also wanted to frame for 2:1 aspect ratio because we do know the way that a lot of people consume music videos is on their phone. We want an aspect ratio that was a little bit wider, but also just wouldn't feel like your phone is mostly like black bars and, you know, everybody please watch them on your TV, But we know the reality of it is, you're scrolling and you're gonna watch it on your phone, and that's probably the way most people consume it. So we cropped our anamorphic to 2:1, and so it's really fortunate to use the 21mm that you all have now. When we were doing the big wide shots of the hat, like sucking everybody up in the venue scene, that way we could still have like this big wide epic scope of the venue, but also cropping down to our 2:1 aspect ratio, which we really couldn't have done with a lens that was any narrower. I've used the Atlas on quite a few projects at this point, and I'd used the Silver series specifically on a Netflix show that I'd done a couple years ago, and so I just kind of remembered how there was like a little more subtlety to the flares, and that you would get like more like soft and veiling flares with off-screen sources and softer sources that you would have on the screen, and that there was kind of more of like a vintage, like uncoated type look. And so I really liked the way that those reacted to light sources. Opted for the Silver series for our primary set, and then we had the 21mm as well. And then also an Arri 8R 8mm lens that I think just shows up in one shot. But in general, I've always loved the Atlas series. Yeah, I really thought the Silver series specifically would give us the look we were going for, to keep it like cinematic and like grounded in like the history of cinema, because I do think that they're great modern lenses, but there is kind of like an overall vintage edge to them, especially the Silver series. In the performance scene, other than the wide shots of the 21mm, every single shot is the 50mm. And a lot of it was just because it felt right, and a lot of it was because like, man, we can just move fast. We had 3 days to shoot it, which is pretty comfortable as far as music video schedules go, but we did have lots of different locations and lots of different areas of some locations. And so it really was just a matter of figuring out how we could plan our day and light everything in like the most efficient way, where we're not sacrificing anything creatively, but we can make sure we get through our day. We shot it all over Los Angeles. The driving stuff, I believe, was in Sherman Oaks, and then we shot at an Elks Lodge there for the wrestling, and then we moved over to a church in Pasadena, which doubled for a few different locations, and then at some sound stages for Joe's scene, but basically all over LA County. The first few stills I put up were all from the performance scene. That was kind of a fun way to play with the previous video. So the arms race video ends in a flashback to Fall Out Boy earlier in their career. I think it takes place in Iowa, technically. Yeah, and it's all in black and white. So we start off and we're originally in this black and white world where Pete breaks his leg. And then at the end of the video, when the band's all rallied back together, we're back in Iowa where the band left off. Brendan and I just kind of had the funny idea, well, like, what about if when the world's restored and the black and white goes away, actually the whole time this venue was like impossibly colorful. Once the world turns color, I've got 2 rainbow streak filters where I have one horizontal and one diagonal stacked in the matte box. So on top of just our RGB lights that are going and the overall colorful environment, there's also these flares that are just like over the top colorful as well. We wanted to be kind of a takeoff on like old 70s anamorphic flares by having like the one horizontal and the one diagonal. Basically, the original plate is on the 21mm, and it's just a bunch of people running around screaming with our lights flashing. And then we had a strobe light rig to where the hat would be, and so you can actually see the rigging behind the hat if you want to pause and look at it, but it's one of those things where nobody's going to notice. So you can see a little bit of speed rail sticking out from either side of the hat, and that's what we had. A couple 1x1s, and I believe probably a sky panel. But anyway, some strobing LEDs that were rigged up there to give our motivating light for what would be VFX'd in later. And then we shot on green screen, basically every member of the crowd acting like they were getting sucked up into nowhere. And then the person who ended up in this still really had the best technique for that, where they were kind of tiptoeing around and like giving themselves a little rotation. And so they were the winner for the real for the primary shot of somebody getting sucked into the bingo hat. Yeah, we shot that at an Elks Lodge. I originally thought they had amateur wrestling there, but I think it's just become kind of a go-to for people shooting wrestling type scenes in LA. But it really was kind of the perfect venue for this kind of scene. And so they built a full-scale wrestling ring inside of the second floor of this Elks Lodge. We talked about the movie The Wrestler a lot because that's kind of the end-all be-all of just beautiful amateur wrestling movies. And overall, just wanted to have the look of just the like dirty fluorescence that you would encounter when you would come into a venue just like this. And so we had regular KinoFlow Coroplast shells with LED tubes inside of them and made a square rig over top. And and then kind of tune that up in post a little bit to match some of the existing fluorescence you can see when they're in the dressing room in the next scene. That was really just lit with existing fluorescence plus like a little mobile light that my gaffer Kyle designed. It was really all about kind of embracing what was already in these venues and enhancing them a bit. Each member has kind of their own specific color palette and their own specific camera movement. And so when we move into the wrestling scene with Patrick, it goes from Steadicam following Pete in to when we break into the Patrick scenes, it becomes handheld, which is also kind of a reference to the way The Wrestler was shot, and also just wanted to like build up more of the like frenetic energy of Patrick just getting taken to town by this guy. Andy's is all like a floatier Steadicam movement, and then Joe's is all traditional dolly on tracks, since he's more of in the like the grounded studio environment. Maybe nobody will notice or feel it, but it's one of those things that's kind of fun to do and fun to think about, is to like introduce these little like restraints and rules to the world you're making. In general, this was an incredibly fun project to shoot. I think everyone on the crew would agree with that it was just one of the ones where just everyone's having such a good time that even though you're cramming in a million locations and a million setups, that you can't help but just have a good time when everyone around you is having a good time too. So that was great. And we're extremely fortunate that this week that MTV nominated us for a VMA for Best Alternative Video. So that's always fun to be recognized for a project that you believe in and that you had a great time doing.